Black man humiliated by saleswoman at dealership. When his father arrives, Dwayne Johnson was sweating nervously as he watched the saleswoman assist the third customer who had arrived after him. It had been nearly an hour since he'd been waiting at the luxurious dealership in New York City, and despite his attempts to get attention, everyone seemed to ignore him on purpose. "Excuse me, I'd like to take a look at that model over there," he finally said, approaching. A blonde saleswoman who had just finished helping another customer. The woman turned with obvious disdain, looking him up and down. "Sorry, but we assist customers in the order they arrive," she replied coldly, adjusting her name tag that read Karen. "I've been here for almost an hour," Dwayne insisted, keeping his composure. "I've seen at least 3 people who came after me get helped." Karen crossed her arms and sighed impatiently. "Maybe you should look for something more basic somewhere else. These are luxury cars, you know," she said, not bothering to hide her condescending tone. A lump formed in Dwayne's throat. He recognized that kind of treatment, but he didn't expect to find it here, not in 2025, not at one of the most prestigious dealerships in the Big Apple. He had planned this day carefully. It was his father's 60th birthday. Walter Johnson, who had spent his whole life working as a driver so his son could get an education. "I want to see the Patriot Elite 450, the most expensive model you have," Dwayne said, holding the saleswoman's gaze. Karen let out a dry laugh. "Of course. And can I see your proof of income, please?" she asked loudly, as other customers turned to watch the scene. Dwayne took a deep breath. With a PhD in economics from Harvard University and postdoctoral studies abroad, he was now a university professor and consultant for international companies. He could buy not just one but several of those cars if he wanted. "Do you ask for proof of income from all customers? Or just me?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady despite the humiliation. "It's standard procedure for certain people," Karen replied with a fake smile on her lips. "Certain people?" Dwayne raised an eyebrow. "People who clearly can't afford a car like this," she added, glancing at the simple denim jacket he was wearing. An elderly woman who had been watching the scene closely stepped forward. "I believe I just heard something very unpleasant," the woman said, her voice calm but firm. "I've worked in this industry for over 40 years, and I've never seen a customer treated this way." Karen adjusted her blazer, visibly uncomfortable. "Mrs. Williams, I'm just following protocol." "There's no protocol for disrespect, young lady," the woman cut her off. "And I am Mrs. Margaret Williams, mother of the owner of this dealership chain. I think you and I will be having a conversation about your future here." Karen's face instantly paled. She opened her mouth to explain herself, but Mrs. Margaret had already turned to Dwayne. "I apologize for the treatment, young man. I promise this won't go unanswered. My son will hear about this incident today." The woman walked out of the dealership, leaving an awkward silence behind. Karen shot a furious glare at Dwayne as if he were to blame for the situation. "Look what you did," she hissed through clenched teeth. Dwayne remained calm, but inside, he felt a mix of anger and sadness. It wasn't the first time he'd faced prejudice, but each new instance hurt just as much. A cleaning staff member discreetly approached him as Karen walked away to assist another customer. Sir, she treats everyone like you like this," the woman whispered. "Everyone who's like us. But no one ever complains because, well, you know, we need the job." "How long has this been going on?" Dwayne asked. "Ever since," she started. "Almost 2 years now. Some people don't even come in when they see she's the one assisting." Dwayne thanked him for the information and made a decision. Discreetly, he activated his phone's recorder and approached Karen again, who was now chatting animatedly with a middle-aged white customer. "Sorry to interrupt," said Dwayne, "but I'm still interested in the Patriot Elite 450, Karen." Ended the other interaction with a radiant smile and turned to Dwayne with a closed expression. "Look, I'll be honest with you," she said, unaware she was being recorded. "People like you should have more realistic ambitions. This car costs over $1 million, maybe in another life." "People like me," Dwayne pressed. "Could you explain that?" "You know," she made a vague gesture. "It's not just about money, it's about fit. Some clients might feel uncomfortable if just anyone could buy the same car as them. Another salesman passing by overheard and interrupted. "Dwayne Johnson, professor at Harvard?" he asked, extending his hand. "I read your latest article on behavioral economics. Brilliant, can I help you?" Karen blocked her colleague's approach. "I'm assisting this client, Brian, and since when do you read academic papers?" "Since Harvard professors started speaking at our annual convention. Mr. Johnson was the keynote speaker last year," Brian replied, confused. Karen was speechless for a moment, but quickly regained her composure. "Well, speaker or not, I'm in the middle of an appointment, and this client is mine." Just then, the dealership door opened, and a black man around 60 entered, wearing a driver's uniform. It was Walter Johnson, Dwayne's father. "Dad!" Dwayne exclaimed, walking over. "You weren't supposed to be here." It was a surprise. "Your uncle let it slip you'd be here today," Walter explained, hugging his son. "I couldn't resist my curiosity." Karen watched the scene with a mix of confusion and disdain. She approached the two with the same air of superiority. "Are you also interested in our vehicles?" she asked sarcastically. Walter, used to being treated with respect despite his profession, was taken aback by her tone. "Actually, my son was trying to surprise me, but Your son?" She laughed, cutting him off. "Well, maybe you'd like to visit our used car lot. We have more affordable options." Dwayne was about to play the recording and confront Karen when the main door opened again. A well-dressed man around 65 entered the dealership. "Walt!" the newcomer exclaimed, arms wide upon seeing Walter. "What a surprise to find you here." "Mr. Robert," Walter replied with a genuine smile. The two men hugged warmly, to Karen's and the other employees' shock. Robert Williams owned not just this dealership, but the entire chain, one of the largest in the United States. "My boy," Robert said, turning to Dwayne and shaking his hand warmly. "How you've grown. Last time I saw you, you were just starting college." Karen looked like she might faint. "You know each other?" she asked, voice trembling. "Walt was my driver for over 25 years, Robert explained, arm around Walter's shoulder. "More than that, he's my best friend. Stood by me when I started with a small garage, long before I dreamed of all this. Took care of me when I was sick, knew my kids since they were born. In fact, he's the one who suggested I invest in luxury dealerships." Dwayne watched Karen's expression shift from shock to panic. "And Dwayne here," Robert continued, "graduated top of his class, turned down job offers from international banks to teach and help other young people. A real pride." "Mr. Robert," began Karen, her voice trembling. "I didn't know it. Was my mother here?" asked Robert, abruptly changing the subject. "I just got a message from her." A tense silence filled the room. Dwayne decided it was time to reveal everything. "Mr. Williams, your mother witnessed a very unpleasant situation," he said, showing his phone, "and it wasn't the first time." In the following minutes, Dwayne played the recording of Karen's words and recounted how he had been treated during that entire hour. He also mentioned the testimony from the cleaning staff about the pattern of discriminatory behavior. Robert listened with a stern expression, while Walter hung his head, reliving similar situations he had faced throughout his life. "Karen, come with me to my office," Robert finally said, his voice controlled but firm. "As for you, Dwayne, I apologize for the treatment you received. This does not represent our company's values." Karen, her eyes brimming with tears, made one last plea. "It was a misunderstanding. I was just following procedures to verify potential clients." Brian, the other salesperson, stepped forward. "That's not true, Mr. Robert. We all know Karen treats black clients differently. There have been complaints before, but since she's the regional manager's niece." Other voices joined in, confirming the pattern of behavior. Dwayne realized many employees had just been waiting for an opportunity to speak. As Robert led Karen to his office, Walter approached his son. "You didn't have to do that, son. I'm used to it." "That's exactly why I had to, Dad," Dwayne replied. "Because no one should ever get used to this." Half an hour later, Robert returned, looking weary. "Karen is gathering her belongings," he announced. "I want everyone to know this kind of behavior will not be tolerated in any of our stores." Dwayne, who had been reflecting during that time, surprised everyone. "Mr. Williams, if I may make a suggestion, firing Karen solves her problem, but not the bigger issue." Robert looked at him curiously. What do you suggest? Instead of just firing her, why not turn this into an opportunity for change? Implement a training program on diversity and customer respect for all employees. Karen herself could be the first to go through it. The dealership owner considered the idea for a moment. That's an interesting approach, but who would lead this program? If I may, Dwayne continued, I could develop something. I have experience with corporate training and research in this field. Robert smiled, impressed by the proposal. Instead of seeking punishment, you're offering a solution. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. In the following days, Dwayne worked on developing the training program while Robert reviewed company policies. Karen, after her conversation with the owner, was given the choice to be fired or participate in the program as a case study. Surprisingly, she chose to stay. The first training took place 2 weeks later. Dwayne led the session professionally, without singling out Karen, but directly addressing the issues of prejudice and discrimination in customer service. This isn't just about moral issues, he explained to the room full of employees. It's also a business matter. Do you have any idea how many potential clients we lose because of prejudice? During the awareness exercise, participants shared their experiences. A black salesman shared how customers sometimes asked to be assisted by another salesman. An administrative employee recounted how her southern accent had been the butt of jokes. Karen remained silent for most of the training, but her eyes revealed a whirlwind of emotions. At the end of the day, she asked to speak with Dwayne privately. Why did you do this? She asked, visibly emotional. You could have demanded my firing, even sued me. You had every right. Dwayne watched her for a moment before responding. Because firing you wouldn't solve the problem. The prejudice would still exist. It would just move somewhere else. I still don't understand why you care. My father spent his whole life being treated as invisible, Dwayne explained. A smart, hard-working, dignified man, but one many people only saw as the driver. He taught me that real change doesn't come from anger but from education. Karen lowered her eyes, unable to hold Dwayne's gaze. I don't know if I can change, she confessed quietly. No one's asking for an overnight transformation, Dwayne replied. Just that you start questioning your own biases. 3 months later, the training program had been implemented across all dealerships in the network. Robert, impressed by the early results, invited Dwayne to expand the project to other companies in the group. Walter finally received his gift, a silver Patriot Elite 450, which he initially refused to accept. This is too much, son, he protested. I don't need a car like this. It's not just a car, Dad, Dwayne explained. It's recognition for everything you've done for me, every overtime shift, every sacrifice to pay for my education. To their surprise, it was Karen who handed over the car keys as part of her learning process. Your son has taught me a lot, Mr. Walter, she said, sincerity in her voice. I hope you enjoy every moment with this car. You deserve it. The moment was recorded and used as promotional material for the new training program, which was beginning to attract attention from other companies in the industry. With the initiative's success, Dwayne was invited to give talks about the case, always protecting Karen's identity. At one such talk during a human resources conference, he met Jessica Thompson, a psychologist specializing in racial relations in the workplace. Your work is impressive, Jessica said after the presentation, but I wonder how you measure long-term results. Dwayne smiled, appreciating the critical question. That's exactly what we're developing now. Metrics to track real behavioral changes beyond just sales numbers. Jessica offered partnerships and ideas, and soon the two were working together, developing a broader methodology. Their professional connection turned into friendship and eventually something more. Meanwhile, at the dealership, Karen was undergoing a gradual but significant transformation. The incident that could have ended her career became a turning point. Encouraged by Robert, she began studying the subject and even enrolled in an ethnic-racial relations course at college. I never thought I was being prejudiced, she confided to Dwayne during a follow-up meeting. "I thought I was just doing my job, identifying customers with real buying potential." "That's how prejudice works," Dwayne explained. "It disguises itself as rationality, as experience, as sales intuition." On a Saturday morning, 6 months after the incident, Dwayne received an unexpected call from Karen. "I need you to come to the dealership," she said, urgency in her voice that worried him. When he arrived, Dwayne found the dealership decorated for an event. Robert, Walter, and several employees were present, along with representatives from other companies in the industry. "What's going on?" asked Dwayne, confused. Karen approached with a nervous smile. "It's the official opening of the Robert Williams Diversity and Inclusion Training Center," she explained. "And we want you to be the director." Dwayne looked around, moved, seeing the smiling faces of his father and Robert. "It was Karen's idea," Robert revealed. "She's been working on this for months in secret." Karen, visibly emotional, added, "You gave me a second chance when I didn't deserve it. That changed my life. I want others to have the same opportunity." That moment marked the beginning of a new chapter in everyone's lives. The training center quickly became a national benchmark, attracting companies from various sectors. Dwayne left Harvard to dedicate himself fully to the project, with Jessica as both a professional and personal partner. Walter, who reluctantly accepted the role of senior experience consultant, shared his stories as a driver to raise awareness among executives and employees. His simplicity and wisdom had more impact than many academic theories. Karen, in turn, became one of the program's lead facilitators, using her own journey as an example. "I was the problem," she'd say in training sessions, "but I can also be part of the solution." A year after the incident, the story was told in a documentary produced by a major streaming platform, bringing even more visibility to the cause. However, success brought new challenges. With the project's expansion came criticism and resistance. Some companies adopted the program only as marketing, with no real commitment to change. Others questioned the approach's effectiveness, calling it too soft for a structural problem. "Maybe they're right," Dwayne confided to Jessica after a particularly tough round of criticism. "Maybe we're just scratching the surface. Or maybe this is exactly what we need right now," she replied. "Approaches that let people change without feeling attacked. Karen is proof it works." The mention of Karen reminded Dwayne of something important. Despite all her professional progress, she rarely spoke about her personal life or the reasons behind her prejudices. On the few occasions the topic came up, she skillfully deflected. One afternoon, while reviewing material for a new training module, Dwayne decided to ask directly, "Karen, we've worked together for a year, but I still don't understand. Where did all that prejudice come from?" She fell silent for a moment, as if deciding whether to share something important. "My mother was a housekeeper," she finally began, her voice trembling. "She was humiliated her whole life. She promised I'd have a different life, that I'd never go through what she did." Karen paused to regain her composure. "I grew up with her telling me to stay away from certain places, certain people, to protect myself. When I got this job, it felt like I was finally on the right side, you know? Like to prove I belonged in that world, I had to show I was different from people like my own mother." Dwayne listened silently, understanding the complexity behind the behavior he'd witnessed. "It's a much deeper wound than we imagined," he remarked. "That's why your work is so important," Karen replied. "It's not just about teaching people not to be prejudiced. It's about healing wounds we didn't even know existed." That conversation transformed the program's approach. Dwayne realized that besides discussing discriminatory behaviors, it was necessary to create safe spaces for people to examine the roots of their prejudices. The training center now also offered individual mentoring sessions and support groups, in addition to the traditional workshops. Demand grew so much that they needed to open their own headquarters independent of the dealerships. Walter, who initially participated only as a special guest, became a central figure in the project. His ability to tell stories and connect with people from different backgrounds was a rare and valuable talent. "My dad has always been like this, Dwayne. remarked to Jessica as they watched Walter chatting animatedly with a group of executives after a session. "He has this gift for making people feel heard and valued." "It's hard to believe he spent his life as a driver," Jessica replied. "He could have been anything." "He didn't have the same opportunities I did," Dwayne said with a sigh. "But he made sure I had every one of them." The story of Karen's transformation continued to inspire program participants. In a particularly important session, attended by CEOs from the country's largest companies, she spoke with an honesty that surprised everyone. "I wasn't a bad person," she explained. "And that's the most dangerous part. People who consider themselves good, fair, just, can carry and perpetuate deep prejudices without even realizing it." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like the video and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. Robert Williams, who followed the project's development with enthusiasm, also went through his own journey of awareness. As a successful businessman, he had never considered himself prejudiced, but the trainings made him question many of his company's practices. "Why do we have so few black employees in management positions?" he asked during a board meeting. "Look around us. This isn't a reflection of the United States." The question caused discomfort among the directors, most of whom were middle-aged white men. One of them tried to justify it. "It's a matter of qualifications, Robert. We hire the best." "Dwayne Johnson is one of the best professionals I've ever met," Robert countered. "And if not for a stroke of luck, he would have been treated as a second-class customer in our store. How many other Dwaynes are we missing?" The conversation led to a complete review of the company's recruitment and promotion processes. With Dwayne and Jessica's consulting, the company implemented affirmative action policies and began actively monitoring diversity at all hierarchical levels. Meanwhile, the relationship between Dwayne and Jessica deepened. Working together daily, sharing the same values and worldview, their romance blossomed naturally. Jessica, the daughter of parents from the Northeast, who had migrated to New York City in search of opportunities, had also faced her share of prejudice in life. "I always had to prove I was capable," she shared during a romantic dinner. My accent didn't define my intelligence. "I think we all carry scars," Dwayne replied, holding her hand across the table. "The difference is how we choose to deal with them." Their relationship became yet another example of resilience and partnership for everyone following the project. Together, they expanded the program to schools and universities, creating versions tailored to different audiences. Walter, seeing his son's happiness, felt his life had been worth it. The luxury car, which he rarely drove, preferring his old vehicle for comfort, symbolized not just material success, but victory over a system that had tried to limit his possibilities. "You know what makes me proudest, son?" he said during a family lunch. "It's not about the car nor your success. It's seeing that you didn't hold on to resentment, that you turned a bad experience into something that helps others." Dwayne smiled, moved. "I learned from you, Dad. You never let yourself grow bitter, even with everything you went through." Jessica, who was present, observed, "That's what makes the program special. It's not about blame or victimhood, it's about recognition and transformation." One day, while Dwayne was working in his office, he received a surprise visit. It was Brian, the salesman who had recognized his name on the day of the incident at the dealership. "Sorry for showing up unannounced," he said, visibly nervous. "But I needed to share something important with you." Brian explained that, inspired by the program, he had started taking night classes in human resources management at Harvard University. His goal was to develop inclusion projects in retail companies. "You changed my life," he confessed. "Before, I saw the problems but did nothing. I thought it wasn't my responsibility." Dwayne, touched by the testimony, realized the impact of his actions went far beyond what he had imagined. The transformation was happening in ever-widening circles. By its second year, the program had trained over 5,000 professionals across various industries. The results were visible not just in the diversity numbers of participating companies, but in the cultural shift they promoted. The dealership, where it all began, had become a model of an inclusive environment with a diverse team trained to serve clients of all backgrounds with the same respect and attention. Sales had increased significantly, proving that inclusion was also good for business. Karen, now the training manager at the center, continued her personal journey of transformation. In an interview for a business magazine, she spoke openly about her experience. "I was the kind of person who would say, 'I'm not racist, but now I understand that racism isn't just about explicit acts of hate, but about privileges and invisible barriers we don't even realize exist.'" The article made national waves, drawing both praise and criticism. Some questioned the sincerity of her transformation, suggesting it was just a personal marketing strategy. "How do I deal with this?" she asked Dwayne, showing him negative comments on social media. "People have the right to doubt," he replied calmly. "What matters is the consistency of your actions over time. Words convince for a moment, but it's behavior that truly transforms." As the program continued to grow, Dwayne and Jessica began thinking about expanding their personal horizons. During a special dinner, he surprised her with a marriage proposal. "I want to build a life with you," he said, emotional. "A family based on the same values we try to teach." Jessica accepted with tears in her eyes. The news was celebrated by everyone, especially Walter, who dreamed of becoming a grandfather. The wedding was held at Robert's beach house, who insisted on offering the space as a gift to the couple. The intimate ceremony brought together close family and friends, including Karen, who had become a dear friend. "If someone had told me 2 years ago I'd be at Dwayne's wedding, probably laughing at something Karen said, I'd have called it crazy," Brian remarked during the celebration. "Life has these surprises," Robert replied. "Sometimes the most unlikely encounters are the ones that change us the most." That same night, as guests celebrated, Karen sought out Walter for a private conversation. "Mr. Walter, there's something I've needed to say for a long time," she began, visibly nervous. "My father was a driver too. He worked his whole life for a businessman who never valued him, unlike Mr. Robert. When I saw you with Mr. Robert treating him as an equal, something inside me rebelled. It was as if you had achieved what my father never could. Respect." Walter listened in silence, understanding the complexity of the feelings she described. "It wasn't envy," Karen continued. "It was pain. Seeing you reminded me of all the times I watched my father be humiliated and couldn't do anything. And so you transferred that pain to Dwayne," Walter concluded gently. Karen nodded, tears in her eyes. "I know it doesn't justify what I did, but I wanted you to know I'm trying to understand my own demons, and that I deeply admire you and your son. You had every right to hate me, but you chose to help me become a better person." Walter smiled and held her hands in his. "You know, my dear, holding on to hate is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It doesn't work that way. You're doing good work. Keep going." That conversation was a healing moment for Karen, who finally faced the true root of her prejudices. In the following months, she started a side project, working with children of domestic workers and drivers, creating a support network and educational opportunities. The training center continued expanding its reach, now with a special focus on small and mid-sized businesses that lacked resources for large diversity programs. Dwayne and Jessica developed an adaptable, accessible methodology, taking knowledge far beyond big corporations. 3 years after the dealership incident, the story took another significant turn. Dwayne was invited to speak at an international conference on diversity in business in New York. It was the first time his work would be recognized outside the United States. "So you have to accept," insisted Jessica, 6 months pregnant with their first child. "It's an incredible opportunity." "I won't leave you alone in this condition," Dwayne replied, worried. "I won't be alone. I have my parents, your dad, our friends. It's just a week." Finally convinced, Dwayne accepted the invitation. While preparing for the trip, he had an idea. "Dad, would you like to come with me?" he asked Walter. "After all, this story is yours too." Walter, who had never left the United States, hesitated at first. "Son, I don't even speak English." "There'll be simultaneous translation," Dwayne assured him. "And more importantly, your presence speaks louder than any speech I could give." With Mr. Roberts' support, he insisted on covering their first-class tickets. Father and son flew to New York. For Walter, it was the fulfillment of a dream he had never allowed himself to have. The conference brought together experts from various countries to discuss inclusive practices in corporate environments. When it was Dwayne's turn, he surprised everyone by inviting his father to join him on stage. "My story begins with this man," Dwayne said, emotional. "A driver who never had the opportunities he gave me, who worked twice as hard so I could study, who taught me, through his example, that dignity isn't bought with money or status." The audience listened in silence as Dwayne recounted the dealership events and what followed. At the end, Walter also spoke, in English, with simultaneous translation, about his experiences as a driver and a father. "I spent my life driving cars I could never afford," he said simply. "But that never stopped me from dreaming my son could. What I didn't imagine was that he'd do much more than that. He'd change how people see themselves." The presentation ended with a standing ovation. Journalists approached for more details, and representatives from multinational companies expressed interest in implementing similar methodologies in their US branches. For Walter, however, the most special moment was another. An elderly lady approached him after the talk. "Your son is extraordinary," she said in English with a strong accent, "but it's easy to see where he got his strength from." Surprised to hear his language, Walter asked, "You speak English?" "I was married to an American for 40 years, she explained. "My husband was also a driver. I understand exactly what you went through, and the pride you feel now." That unlikely encounter strengthened Walter's conviction even more that stories like his needed to be told. Back in the United States, he decided he wanted to take a more active role in his son's project. Meanwhile, Dwayne and Jessica were preparing for the baby's arrival. They decided that if it was a boy, they'd name him Walter, after his grandfather. If it was a girl, she'd be Margaret, in honor of Mrs. Margaret Williams, who had recently passed away after a lifetime dedicated to social causes. Karen, now the executive director of the center, continued to surprise everyone with her dedication. The Project for Domestic Workers' Children had grown and become an independent NGO, offering scholarships and professional mentorship. "I never imagined my worst action would lead me to the best job of my life," she confided in Dwayne during a meeting. "That reminds me of something my father always said," he replied. "It's not about never falling, but about how you get back up." A week before the baby's birth, Dwayne was surprised by a call from Robert. "I need you to come to my office," the businessman said, urgency in his voice. "It's important." When he arrived, Dwayne found Robert, Walter, and a man he didn't know, all with serious expressions. "Son, this is Mr. George Patterson," Walter introduced. "He worked with Karen's father." Dwayne greeted the man, confused about the purpose of the meeting. "Mr. Dwayne," George began, "I worked for over 30 years as the driver for Dr. Richard Blackwell, Karen's father. I saw a lot in that house. Things that explain a lot about how she became who she was." In the following minutes, George told a story none of them knew. Karen's father, a cruel and prejudiced businessman, systematically humiliated his employees, especially black workers. Her mother, initially the family's housekeeper, ended up marrying the boss after getting pregnant, but was never truly accepted in his social circles. Karen grew up watching her mother be treated as inferior, even as the boss's wife, George explained. Her own father taught her she was better than the employees, but at the same time, she'd never be as good as those born into privilege. Robert and Walter listened in silence while Dwayne tried to process how this information changed his understanding of Karen. "Why are you telling us this now?" Dwayne finally asked. "Because Dr. Richard is in his final days," George replied, "and he wants to see his daughter before he goes. He heard about the work she's doing and, well, I think he wants to make amends." Dwayne understood the complexity of the situation. Karen had mentioned her father only once, saying they hadn't been in touch for years. "Do you know where he is?" Robert asked. "At Mount Sinai Hospital. He doesn't have more than a few days." Dwayne thanked him for the information and promised to talk to Karen, though he knew it would be a difficult conversation. That revelation explained so much about the layers of prejudice and self-loathing she had shown. That same night, he visited Karen at her home. Carefully, he shared what he'd learned. "I don't want to see him," was her immediate response. He destroyed my mother, turned her into a shadow and taught me to hate part of who I am. I understand your decision, Dwayne replied. Yeah, but as someone who works with transformation, you know that sometimes we need to face our greatest fears to truly move forward. Karen fell silent for a long moment. What if I go and nothing changes? What if I still feel the same hatred? Then at least you'll know you tried, replied Dwayne. Not for him, but for yourself. After more reflection, Karen decided to visit her father at the hospital, but asked Dwayne to come with her. He agreed immediately, recognizing the importance of that moment for her journey. At the hospital, they found a frail man, nothing like the authoritarian figure Karen had described. When they entered the room, Mr. Richards' eyes filled with tears. My daughter, he murmured weakly. You came. Karen kept a safe distance, arms crossed defensively. Why did you want to see me? She asked, straight to the point. To ask for forgiveness, he replied. I know I don't deserve it, but I had to try. In the minutes that followed, Richard admitted his mistakes as a father and as a human being. He spoke of the pride he felt seeing the work Karen was doing, so different from the values he had tried to instill in her. You've become a better person than I ever was, he said. Your mother would be proud. Karen, who had promised herself she wouldn't show emotion, felt tears streaming down her face. You destroyed her, she accused, made her feel inferior her whole life. Yes, Richard admitted, and that was my greatest mistake. She was the best person I ever knew, and I never deserved her. The conversation continued for a while longer, painful but necessary. In the end, Karen didn't offer explicit forgiveness, but agreed to visit her father again. As they left the hospital, she confessed to Dwayne, I always thought I hated him, because he was cruel to others. Now I see I hated him because he taught me to hate a part of myself, the part that came from my mother. Dwayne simply listened, respecting Karen's emotional process. That meeting had been an important step in understanding her own actions and prejudices. In the weeks that followed, Karen visited her father regularly until his passing. Though the reconciliation wasn't complete, she found a measure of peace by confronting the source of many of her emotional wounds. Meanwhile, Jessica gave birth to a healthy baby girl named Margaret, as planned. The baby's arrival brought a new dimension to Dwayne and Jessica's purpose. Now they were working to build a better world, not just as professionals, but as parents. I want her to grow up in a country where she isn't judged by her skin color or her parents' background, Dwayne said, cradling his daughter. We're planting the seeds for that, Jessica replied, even if the full results only show in her generation. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. 5 years had passed since the incident at the dealership. The training. Center had grown into an internationally respected institute with methodologies applied across companies in various industries. Dwayne and Jessica took turns leading the project, allowing both to continue their academic careers alongside it. Margaret, now nearly 5, grew up curious and observant. One afternoon, while visiting the original dealership with her grandfather, Walter, she asked a question that deeply moved everyone. Grandpa, why do people treat others badly just because they're different? Walter, ever wise in his simplicity, replied, Because they're afraid, my dear, afraid of what they don't know. That's why your father and mother's work is so important. They help people let go of that fear. The girl seemed to think seriously about her answer. When I grow up, I want to do that too, she declared with the conviction only children possess. Walter smiled, moved to see how his legacy lived on through his granddaughter. That same day, Robert Williams announced his retirement as president of the dealership network. To many's surprise, he nominated Brian, the salesman who had recognized Dwayne years earlier, as his successor. Brian has shown not just business competence, but human vision and moral courage, Robert explained. Exactly what we need to lead in the future. The choice was met with enthusiasm by the employees. Under Brian's mentorship, many young people, from diverse backgrounds, had found growth opportunities in the company. Karen, now a recognized expert in corporate diversity, received speaking invitations across the United States. Her personal story of transformation inspired others to examine their own prejudices. "The shame for what I did never fully disappeared," she confided in an interview. "But I learned to use it as fuel for change, not as an anchor dragging me down." Dwayne and Jessica's marriage remained strong, built on mutual admiration and shared values. Together, they expanded the Institute's reach to public schools, believing true transformation began with education. One day, during an event at the Institute's headquarters, Dwayne was surprised by a familiar face, the janitor who had told him about Karen's behavior years earlier. "Ms. Dorothy," he exclaimed, recognizing her immediately. "What a pleasure to see you here." "I came to see firsthand what you've been doing," she replied with a smile. "My grandson is in the scholarship program." Dwayne was moved to learn the young man, now 18, had been selected for the Institute's internship program and planned to study psychology. "It all started that day, didn't it?" Ms. Dorothy remarked, "when you decided not to stay silent." "Actually, it began long before," Dwayne answered, "with people like you and my father, who kept their dignity even when the world tried to take it away." That encounter made Dwayne reflect on how small actions could spark big changes. If he had simply walked away from the dealership, if he had accepted discriminatory treatment as normal, how many different stories would have gone untold? To celebrate the Institute's 5th anniversary, Dwayne organized a special event, gathering everyone who had been part of the journey. Robert and Walter, now inseparable friends, arrived together. Karen came with her fiancé, a history teacher she'd met during a project in public schools. Brian brought his entire team of young salespeople. During his speech, Dwayne surprised everyone by announcing a new initiative. "Today, we launch the Walter Johnson Professional Education Fund," he declared, "a program for the children of drivers, housekeepers, and other professionals who, like my father, sacrifice so much to give their kids opportunities." Walter, who hadn't been told, couldn't hold back his tears. The fund, financed by Robert, Williams and other business leaders moved by the cause, would offer full scholarships to universities and technical courses. More than that, it included professional mentorship and psychological support for recipients. "Opening doors isn't enough," Dwayne explained. "We must ensure people have what they need to walk through them." After the event, as everyone celebrated, Walter pulled his son aside for a private talk. "You know, I've never liked tributes," he said, feigning seriousness. "But this one I'll accept." Dwayne hugged his father, overwhelmed with gratitude for everything he represented. "One day," as Walter continued, "someone will tell our story and say it all began when a driver dreamed too big for his son. But we know that's not true." "No?" asked Dwayne. "No. It began when a father taught his son that dignity has no price, and that respect is everyone's right, not some people's privilege." Those simple words perfectly captured the essence of everything they had built together. In the years that followed, the Institute kept expanding its reach, touching businesses, schools, and communities across the United States. The methodology developed by Dwayne and Jessica was adapted for different cultural contexts and implemented in other countries. Walter, now 70 but still full of energy, devoted himself to the fund that bore his name, sharing his wisdom with young people who, like Dwayne once had, dreamed of opportunities their parents never had. Karen became a national leader in diversity and inclusion, using her own story as proof that change is possible. Her marriage to Professor Michael added a new dimension to her life, especially when they discovered they were expecting a child. "I'll teach him different values than the ones I learned," she promised during dinner with Dwayne and Jessica. "Values I learned from you." The dealership network, under Brian's leadership, became a model for inclusivity, with hiring, policies that prioritized diversity and respectful service for every customer. Robert, even in retirement, kept supporting the social projects he'd helped create. His friendship with Walter grew stronger every day, proving that real bonds can overcome social barriers and prejudice. Margaret and her younger brother, Nathan, grew up in an environment where respect for diversity was fundamental. The girl, in particular, showed a remarkable sensitivity to social issues, often bringing school discussions home. "She's just like you," Jessica told Dwayne. "She can't see injustice and stay quiet." "I hope she never changes," he replied. "The world needs people like that." 10 years after the incident at the dealership, the story had inspired changes none of them could have imagined. What began as a moment of discrimination had become a movement for awareness, reaching thousands. At a special ceremony, Dwayne was honored by the Department of Education for his contributions to racial and social equality. In his speech, he made sure to share the recognition. "This isn't one man's story, but many," he said. "My father, who taught me the value of dignity. Robert Williams, who had the courage to recognize and fix mistakes in his company. Karen, who proved change is possible when we confront our own biases. Mrs. Margaret, who refused to stay silent in the face of injustice. And so many others who choose respect over discrimination every day." After the ceremony, Dwayne found Walter chatting excitedly with a group of young scholars from the fund that bore his name. "Look at this," his father said proudly. "These kids will go further than both of us combined." Dwayne smiled, knowing it was true. Real success wasn't in personal achievements, but in paving the way for others. The story that began with humiliation had become a powerful reminder that small actions can create big change, and that even in the hardest times, there's always a chance to choose a different path. At the Institute's 10-year celebration, Dwayne, Jessica, Walter, Robert, Karen, and everyone else who had been part of the journey gathered once more. Looking around at the smiling, diverse faces, Dwayne felt a deep sense of gratitude. What could have been just another case of routine discrimination, forgotten and normalized, had turned into a force for change. Because someone chose not to stay silent, because others chose to listen, because everyone together decided to turn pain into positive action. And in the end, that was the real lesson. That change begins with courage. The courage to confront prejudice, to acknowledge mistakes, to forgive, to start anew. The courage to believe that a fairer, more respectful world is possible. As he watched Margaret playing with other children, completely unaware of the barriers that once separated their parents and grandparents, Dwayne knew all the effort had been worth it. Not just for him or for his family, but for all the Margarets who would come after, who would grow up in a world a little less prejudiced, a little more welcoming. "In the end," Walter said, as if reading his son's thoughts, "it's not about luxury cars or status, it's about dignity, about the right to be treated with respect no matter who you are or where you come from." Dwayne nodded, hugging his father. The journey was far from over, but the path was now a little clearer, a little more open, and that, in itself, was already a victory. Because real transformation doesn't happen in grand, heroic gestures, but in the small daily choices, in the decision not to stay silent in the face of injustice, to refuse to accept the unacceptable as normal, to offer understanding instead of judgment, to see others as equals, not as different. And that night, as the celebration continued, Dwayne knew that this story, which began with pain and humiliation, had found its true meaning, not as an end in itself, but as a beginning. The beginning of many more stories of respect, dignity, and transformation. The end. Dear listener, this journey of overcoming and transformation can also continue with you. If this story touched your heart, leave your like and subscribe to the channel to follow more narratives that inspire real change. Tell us in the comments, what would you do in Dwayne's place? Your opinion is valuable to us.